All right, good to see those of you here physically present and those of you online. Thanks so much for joining us. Really enjoyed the last few weeks as we've unpacked, the essence of Buddhism, what makes some of the Buddhists, what's Buddhists about, and, what is a Dharma practice versus a practice, and what is it that transforms this opportunity into one of liberation, and how can we do that in our daily lives? And it's been really rich the last couple of weeks. I've really enjoyed it. It also brought me to studying a little bit more of Theravada Buddhism and listening to some great teachings and studying with Bhikkhu Bodhi, phenomenal scholar in that tradition. Really have appreciated his insights. And that's led to the journey now, which is what's a Mahayana perspective, this path of a Bodhisattva of Buddhahood. And so we're going to begin the 6 perfections today. One of the perspectives that he brought in these teachings from a Theravada perspective, I found really interesting. I'd never heard it before, exactly the way he presented it. And that was, within Theravada Buddhism, the goal is to be an arhat, to find liberation, to be, free of samsara. And there's a distinction between one who finds liberation, one who is an arhat, and a Buddha. And from a Mahayana perspective, they make those distinctions pretty clear. And Bhikkhu Bodhi, he was giving a history of the Abhidharma from their perspective. And the way he approached it was during the time of the Buddha's teachings, all of these teachings that went to the path of liberation, that the question was always, how do I find liberation? How do I become an arhat? But nobody ever asked the Buddha, how do I become a Buddha? That's not the language of the discourses in the sutras. And they asked for, and the distinction that he finds is that an arhat is one who follows the teachings, right? The teachings are given. I follow the teachings. I find liberation. And a Buddha would be one who develops the path, discovers a path, can give the path, just fully omniscient. And so throughout all those sutras, there was a technical phrase about how they would ask for a teaching, but it was always, in regard to how do I find liberation? How do I become an arhat? And so those teachings prevailed. And then years later, as people practiced, as they gained more insight, more realization, they started to think about, well, what do you got to do to be a Buddha? And so these later teachings that came within the Mahayana tradition, within the Bodhisattva path, became more prominent with a different question. How do you become a Buddha? How do you attain that? And wow, I'd never, because I've always been taught from a Mahayana perspective. And so in these later teachings, these later commentaries, these opportunities that practitioners had really emphasized this path of full omniscience, of full Buddhahood, and a path of a Bodhisattva. So even though there was references there was always distinctions, it wasn't as clear in the earlier teachings. And so the fundamental basis, we just did the fundamental principles of the core of Buddhist practice within 4 Noble Truths. We thought, well, let's go with the core of the Bodhisattva path, which is these 6 perfections. And it's often nicer to, I think, more helpful to refer to them as these 6 far-reaching attitudes, because they are far-reaching in that they take us across samsara. They take us to our full awakening. And just the translation is a little nicer. Plus, I'm sure no one here is a perfectionist, right? And that'll wear you down. Yeah, big inhibitor. So in approaching this then, shifting to a path of a bodhisattva, and what makes a path of a bodhisattva a little different than just a path of liberation, or what makes it different from I just would like a good life. right? I don't want to suffer so much. And if this thing called rebirth actually exists, I'd like a good one next time. You know, people come into Dharma practice with various motivations. And rarely does anyone come into a Dharma teaching or center, seeking things other than to eliminate suffering, in the sense that people don't practice unless they're in some pain, right? People have had some discomfort, had some challenges, have looked around, have noticed something is awry, that there's some challenges here. And this provides that motivation to seek a path, to think about what we can do. Sometimes more subtle, sometimes much more concrete. And so, the question becomes, why do I suffer? Can I stop suffering? Are there things I can do to improve the quality of my well-being? Fundamental questions. And when they're asked in a worldly context, the answer is, to get a new mattress, to have a vacation, to, get a nicer house, do a garden, do a Netflix binge. That's a thing, right? They call it like binge and something like, I don't know. So, which is to distract, to seek this momentary pleasure. And so this worldly existence of gain and loss, pain and pleasure, good reputation, bad reputation. When we really praise and criticism, when we're guided by those, we're not going to find any real lasting happiness. And that will not prevent us from doing it. Not at all. So is there a bigger question that makes us ripe for an opportunity to engage in a path of Dharma? And that becomes a distinction between what we would call a rare and precious human rebirth, but just a human life. And there is a distinction. There's very few humans have a rare and precious human rebirth. There's something like 7 billion out there, plus like 7.5 now. Out of all those humans, how many of them are taking some time to reflect upon the quality of their life and the meaning of their life? And of those who question that, how many are doing anything about it? How many don't even have the opportunity to ask that question because of where they live, because of just they have to survive today, or they don't have access to teachings, they don't even have access to learn how to read and write? How many of the 7 billion are just surviving? And then of those with wealth and of those with resources, how many of those are even interested in spending a Wednesday evening sitting around at a Dharma center? They could be doing something fun. So when we start to really parse out these 18 specific qualities that make up rare and precious human rebirth, it is these resources. It is the accessibility, but there's this one really important piece, and that's an inclination to ask the question, what's this all about? And a desire to do something about it. And that is a big difference. Even of, what is it that gets, a small number of people here, those of you online, to actually take some time to put effort in, to do something that initially is not that fun and requires effort. Why would I do that when I could be sitting in a sauna? Why? Because at some point there is a clear understanding that seeking stimulus-driven pleasure can only lead to dissatisfaction. That's the only result. And when that awakening happens, when that awakening happens, then there's a real opportunity to seek the understanding of the source of my real well-being, to see my actual qualities that are available. That is an opportunity. And once that door is cracked, it's kind of hard to close, we can even ignore it for a while, but it's kind of there, it's just kind of there. Once you kind of know that door is cracked, it says, wow, joy is not in things, it's in me, that's a different thing. The source of my suffering is coming from how I'm perceiving the karma I've created. Once that door is cracked open, there's just an itch. And even if we don't do anything about it, it's kind of like a little thorn in your side. And then the opportunity is ripe. Then we engage in a path. And then the decision becomes, and it's something that evolves, I think, over time. I might come just because I don't want to suffer so much now. I might come because, I really understand that this is unnecessary suffering. I might come because I really have found a path and I don't want others to suffer. And so these are these three, what we call scopes or levels of motivation. And those can determine, our ultimate outcomes. So a lot of people can come, and there's a lot of practitioners that just, want to have as little pain in this life and would like to have a good next life. That's not unreasonable. I'd like to have a lot less pain now, and I would like to, in my next life, at least be a human with some opportunity, and maybe I can get one of those. What is it that there's a thing that turns on your heat and air conditioning at your house, and turns on your lights. There is a device that does that. I was just in New York, like everybody has it. No, it's not a clap on. It's this thing you can control from, like, you're not even home. And you can
just on your smartphone?
It might be. Yeah. Oh, everybody in New York, I was just out there, like, they have this thing. And their house, is whatever, gets the AC on, gets the heat on, opens the garage door, it's some kind of device.
I'd rather clap.
Yeah, clap on, clap off. Yeah, I don't know if it could hear you if you're in California. So, so that get back on track, John.
Sorry.
No, it's my fault. I was going there.
So they're online, raise their hand.
Oh, okay.
It's Betsy, one moment.
Hey there, Betsy. Oh, can't hear. Maybe you're muted.
It's called a nest.
A nest, that's right. Thank you so much. That's all we need is a nest.
Then we'll be happy.
Then we'll be happy. Then our life will be made. At least we never have to go home to a cold house. As long as it works. One of the reasons I know about this is the guy's house got hit by lightning and it fried his nest, which fried the wiring and everything. So anyway. So thanks. So, that's a pretty common motivation. And it's often something somebody returns to. But once we start understanding the cause of suffering, we start thinking and studying the Dharma, we come to the idea that, I can be free of this, that there is a liberation. I don't have to be a prisoner of these constructs that I've created, the way I perceive the world, this continual cycle of rebirth, the karma that compels me to act in ways that I don't even want to act, and that inertia of habit, tendency that I've been creating. And once we start to unravel that, we start to realize, wow, I do not need to be a prisoner anymore. I don't need to have this experience. And so that's that arhat, that's that opportunity to say, I want to be free of samsara. I want to recognize and find this path of liberation. So the first one, this is all before I get to the third, is really focusing on ethical behavior. You know, that's if you want to have a less suffering in this life, if you want to have a potential of a good rebirth. It's pretty simple, ethical living, you know, virtue. And they say that's the path of having another rebirth in a human form and having these potentials. I'm going to digress for a moment because there's those in a sort of new movement of Buddhism, you know, sort of secular Buddhism, that aren't focused, you know, on anything beyond, you know, like how do we make this life better? And you're going to find the same principles apply. That if I start recognizing my delusional thinking, if I start engaging in more ethical behavior, I'm going to suffer less. I mean, so a lot of these principles can even be applied to just having a better worldly life. And there is a movement like that. And then there's this ultimate one that says, wow, you know what? How about Buddhahood? How about complete liberation? How about recognizing the value of all other beings? What about recognizing that, you know, everyone is going through this thing like me? And what if I recognize my connection to them and have the same care and concern that I would have for my granddaughter or my mom? And I recognize that value, that I'm a part of this thing that's interdependent and unified in a sense that I don't even see yet. What if I had that heart? And that is the path of a bodhisattva. And so it's in that context that these 6 perfections really line up. And it's with that motivation that they become a path of Buddhahood. And it's also with that motivation that is conjoined with wisdom. So approaching these 6 perfections, one is to say that I'm approaching it with this motivation, that I'm in for the long haul, you know, like I'm in it, you know. And I'm in it for the benefit of all beings because I recognize I'm inextricably linked, you know, that there is really no difference. Everybody here, you know, if I think about my granddaughters, everybody's somebody's grandson, granddaughter, you know, and all of that. I mean, there's a very simple thing that says, yeah, everyone has this. Why are mine special, right? The fact that I call them mine, which is also a funny thing. Anybody who's a parent, good luck trying to get your kid to do what you want. How much yours are they? They think they're theirs. But if we go, you know, through these more clear understandings of recognizing what's actually happy is, you know, everything I have in my life is because of others, right? The building we're in, the food I eat, the clothing I wear, the words I use, the fact I can read. How many beings were a part of the conditions that gave rise for me to be sitting here today and have the ability to function, to read, to write? How did I get here? You know, who made the bicycle that I have? You know, where did all that come from, and so forth. All of that is undeniable, right? That I can't have anything without all of you and all those before us and all those conditions that gave rise. But my human mind's not going to think about that. And I'm going to get to me and mine. There's you and yours. And now I have the source of suffering. And we'll even say things like, I'm going to tend to the needs of me and mine, which loosely translated is I'm going to suffer a lot. But that's not what it sounds like when I say it. So those that have found this path have, you know, cut through that little door, cracked open, that understanding, that recognition. And then coupling that with some diligent investigation, some questioning, some practice, we build a foundation that says, this makes very clear to me that this is a path for me. And when that's ready, we can engage in this path. And when we do that with an understanding of interdependence and this great compassion, that is when these 6 far-reaching attitudes become far-reaching attitudes. As there's 6 of them, and we can practice them without all of that, right? Generosity, we can practice generosity, all the time, right? I donate, we can help somebody, and we do it, and it's pretty common. I don't think people recognize how generous they really are. We hate to see people suffer in general, excuse me. It's so natural when someone falls that we help them. People rush to them. Car gets enacted, people rush to them. Like our generosity, our nature, just as humans in general, there's a goodness and a connectedness. It's a part of that experience. And there's even studies now that they've really been trying to conduct to scientifically prove that we're all born with an innate goodness. There's all these tests they've been doing, like 6 months, 6 month babies, and they're really finding that the evidence is really demonstrating before all of the stuff that gets layered on that there's an innate natural goodness that's available. And from Buddhist teachings, we recognize that's our true nature. And so it's not that we're acquiring anything, it's that we are cultivating that which is already there. We're not acquiring this compassion, we're not acquiring this love. That's our nature, and what we're doing is getting rid of that which obscures it, the delusion which sees my separateness, the delusion which grasps onto attachment and exaggeration and confusion. And that's what this path is about. And when I conjoin that wisdom with compassion and then engage in these 6 perfections, well, now these become far-reaching attitudes that are the path of a bodhisattva. And it's a really rich practice. So these 6, generosity, ethics, patience, joyous effort, often feels like perseverance, concentration, and wisdom, these 6. They can be approached, and since I'm of the Gelugpa tradition, oh man, we can parse this down. The first 5 are skillful actions, bodhicitta. Last one, wisdom, compassion, wisdom. The first 3, well, how we attend to others. The second 3, how I attend to myself. We overanalyze like everything. And we can really parse it down to what are the beneficial factors of this. But fundamentally, if we get to the essence, it's going to always be relevant, is what's my motivation with them. Right? That's the weight. That's the weight. And they're not linear, right? They're not linear. They're not, okay, I got to really be perfect with generosity before I go on being a virtuous person. And there's going to be a way that they support each other, that they're not just not linear, they are intertwined. And so the more virtuous I am, the easier is obviously to cultivate generosity, but also when I go to meditate, my concentration is going to be easier, right? Because my mind's more clear, I don't have a lot of agitation. The more wisdom that I'm applying to all of this, I can bring that interdependence into the understanding of my generosity and our interconnection. So they all really work together, and they support each other. There's a lot of understanding around the idea that certain mental qualities come in clusters, right? So kindness, compassion, patience, those, they kind of cluster together. If you're developing one, you're going to more easily, they're going to come along. Anger, resentment, jealousy, frustration, they're going to come along. And so when the emphasis, leading up to these things like the four immeasurable attitudes, well, they're going to really ripen my mind and bring along the conditions that I can really engage in these mental far-reaching attitudes in an easier way.
Is anybody else hearing the microphone cut out? No. I think it's fading, so.
No.
Can I just replace the batteries real quick?
Yes. That would give me an opportunity to stop talking, right?
Yeah, where's the device?
Be patient in line. We're getting a battery check.
Okay.
Gives me a chance to pull this up.
Try that.
I have a rare and precious human rebirth, but not good eyesight. I have glasses.
Not one to 1812.
Yeah, it wasn't right.
Down to 17. 20.
Bummer. Okay, so is that good? So these qualities, they come together, they support each other, and as we cultivate them, they ripen the conditions for each other. And so when we approach this first one, generosity, it is sometimes nice to focus on something we can start with. And often the reason is it's easier to be generous. Like that's a good starting point. I can learn to do that. But there's a much riper reason, I think, in general, is that if I start to really engage in generosity with the far-reaching attitude of generosity in the way that it's taught, it's going to really present the condition for wisdom, for patience, for virtuous activity, to be more attentive and so forth with concentration. Like it really just lays a nice ground, because it's not just generosity in that I'm giving, it's that I'm cultivating with the understanding of this interdependence, my connection to my experience of you and others and the world I live in and the prison that we're in. We call samsara. I'm consciously aware of that. And I'm aspiring this wish to truly be of benefit. It's just really laying down a foundation to be of benefit. And that this mind of generosity is cultivating this deep desire to give, in a sense of being productive, in a sense of being helpful, and that there's no limitation on the attitude that gives rise to that. As a matter of fact, we don't have to have a lot to give. The emphasis here is cultivating that desire to give, that wish to give, and that aspiration that then sits, which really lays this foundation for us to understand our connection, understand our common worries, understanding the difficulties that we all have, and recognizing that through empathetic actions. And so it's a really valuable thing. It's not something as simple as, we can go through generosity, and there's 3 types of giving, and, and what are they? Because it's not the categories as much as the aspiration, the understanding, that wisdom I'm bringing to it. And so as we cultivate this mind of generosity, we're really laying down this very rich way of engaging in the world. And I don't think it's limited to Buddhism. You know, obviously with the understanding of interdependence, it is. But what prompted me when I was just at the end of my meditation was the thought about a really good example of the mind of generosity is really in the prayer of Saint Francis. You know, I don't know if too many people are familiar with that, but and again, this is to to a Lord, but you're going to get this mind, I think. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there's hatred, let me sow love. Where there's injury, pardon. Where there's discord, union. Where there's doubt, faith. Where there's despair, hope. Where there's darkness, light. And where there's sadness, joy. O Divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive, it is in pardoning that we are pardoned, and it is in dying that we are born to eternal life. It's a beautiful, think of that mind, right? And if we put that in this Buddhist context, that's the point. I'm not here to be consoled. I'm here to console. I'm here to help whatever's going on. And this type of giving, this type of generosity, is just going to permeate my experience with others. And it's that type of mind that we're talking about that we can bring into the world. So we find it in other lineages too. We don't have the corner on being generous, kind, and helping others and seeking to understand the nature of ourself and others. So approaching that then, this idea of generosity, how do we cultivate that mind? And number one, is even to enter it, is to really recognize our shared human experience. And it, not limited to humans, right? Animals, all beings. But to be able to spend some time identifying that. So to do some contemplations on the nature of self, the nature of our experience with phenomena and others and all beings, and recognizing all that suffering that others endure, as well as myself. And so in doing that, cultivating, there's a, in cultivating bodhicitta, we've got lists. And they're not even numbered correctly, I don't think. Because we have the 7-point cause and effect. But the first point's really equanimity. So maybe there's 8, but 7, but there's a 0 point. Tibetans count funny. But it's really that equanimity we want to cultivate. And that equanimity is based on recognizing that equal value of all beings. And that I'm part of this, and that all of this is better if your needs are met, right? And when your needs are met, you're hopefully not robbing my car. That the kids are safer, right? When people have their needs met. That people are not blowing themselves up when they feel valued, and doing suicide attacks. That really getting to the root of things. What are these basic needs in humanity or animals or other beings that we're engaged with? That recognizing that all of this afflicted state is really the basis of suffering, and what can I do with that, and that I'm a part of it. And it's with that, recognizing we're all in prison together, it makes a difference. But everyone has the Buddha nature. Every being has that. And so it takes some work to get there, right? We can talk about it. It sounds cute. It really sounds nice. That prayer was inspiring. But don't even cut me off on the highway. You know what I mean? Or, that was my parking spot, which is, how quickly things can change, or how they treated me. And so preparing for this really takes some time to start recognizing, contemplating within the three wisdoms. Some sense of it, not even like a great realization, but a sense of it. Just, water that seed, crack that door a little bit to recognize and see how others are suffering. And spend some time with it, not just a discussion. The three wisdoms I referred to, I know some of you probably know very well, but we have a lot of people, I don't even know how many are online. One wisdom is hearing a teaching, right? So I'm hearing a teaching, I'm reading a teaching, and that's a wisdom. The second one is contemplating, really thinking about it, breaking it down, debating it. Does that hold up? And I'm going to get a greater realization out of that. Is it true? Is it not true? Let me challenge that. What about this? What about that? That's one of Aaron's skills, actually. You torment people with questions, right, Aaron? Special skill set. Yeah. So with that kind of questioning, you can gain a real strong realization because things either hold up or they don't. And so that's a greater wisdom. And then with that realization, to sit with that in meditation, then it transitions from ideas and philosophy to an actual realization that's embodied. And so the idea is to get these teachings, to think about them, to talk about them, to debate them, to poke at them, to observe them, and with that realization, to meditate with them, to hold them. And then we have a very different way of being in the world. And with that, it's kind of funny to say, that my mental emotional suffering doesn't come from you, right? I mean, I get that. And then, but do I get that? To at some point, that doesn't even make sense in your mind. That when you start to have some anger, resentment, jealousy, you don't even question that it's out there. It's here. Like that's a different realization. That's, why would I blame you? Like that's insane. And the thought process doesn't arise anymore because I've observed it time and time and time again. I've tested it time and time again. I've sat with it. I've reflected on it. I've changed my mental states, and I've noticed the difference again and again and again. And then that it just doesn't arise. It doesn't make sense. It's and so that's the whole point of our Buddhist practice is to eliminate the causes, right? Eliminate the seeds. So the cause of resentment, the cause of anger. Well, they're coming from confusion and misperception. As I eliminate those, they don't arise. So taking some time with that allows us to enter this path with not just a generosity with that, really powerful force that St. Francis was talking about, but the desire that all beings be free of suffering, pretty great aspiration. But as I approach it, I recognize that all of you are also the source of my liberation, right? Like the only way I get there, right? Seeing all others is more precious than a wish-fulfilling jewel. When I recognize that these teachings won't get me to enlightenment. My practice will not get me to enlightenment. I cannot cultivate compassion without others. I cannot cultivate the wisdom and the patience without others. I couldn't even come to a Dharma center without others. I couldn't have any of these opportunities without others. In other words, when I start to recognize that, we have a guest coming in here. Hello, welcome. So when I approach this with this understanding, then I start to recognize that you're not in my way, you are the way. And that provides some incredible opportunity to do practice. And it's with that mind that we can approach generosity. And then we could get selfish and who am I really helping? We don't want to go that far. So the Dalai Lama does call it wisely selfish. But recognizing this shared experience that we're having, recognizing that this opportunity that comes just, eons of lifetimes, and it's here right now, that you're a part of that and that you are that path to awakening for me. It's our first verse in the 8th verse of the thought transformation. It's that direct understanding. All the other verses are, well, how do I do that? Right? And this is how do I do that? So laying the foundation is really important. And so getting teachings, right? I get my first wisdom, I get some teachings, have a nice philosophical conversation. We sit out, drink lattes, and talk about interdependence and all that, But the ripening of the mind that is starting to transform is really starting with that second wisdom of and really tearing apart, is this true? And the only way I would know it's true is if I check, if I test, if I observe. So I have to really be mindful of seeing how suffering arises and how these opportunities come. There's a question. Yep. Come in. Yeah, there's that little unmute button that you have to do to ask the question. Well, Hannah, if you can find your unmute button, feel free to ask a question. I love technology.
Okay, we can come back if she raises her hand again.
And you can type in a question in the little chat box or question and answer box as well if you're having trouble with the mic. So laying the found work, I think, is foundational in this. Oh, that's obvious. That's a bit redundant, right? Is critical to engaging then in these 6 far-reaching attitudes now as a Bodhisattva path. And then we approach generosity. So now I'm approaching generosity with that mind that recognizes this whole path of awakening is dependent upon others, that I'm part of this and you're part of this, and I suffer and you suffer. And if we take it those steps further, that through multiple lifetimes, we've had these shared experiences. And even if we can't go that far, we can certainly see in this lifetime how everything I have is inextricably tied to others. I mean, I don't even know who made the thread that put this shirt together, or how far that came from, or whether that tip at a restaurant helped someone feed their children, or what those conditions are. When I realize that, then this generosity comes, and it comes with the idea of giving, and so there are these 3 types, which we'll get to. But again, it's if we can join that aspiration, that mind, as was read so eloquently in that prayer, of it's really often compared to a mother's love for their child. It's that kind of unconditional sense of giving. But even in that sense, it's a wise giving, right? It's a wise giving. So, and it's really delivered in a way to remedy specific, difficulties. So the first one is material, giving, right? Somebody is cold, you give them a jacket. There's all these people that could use some food in a soup kitchen. We can do that. There's there's this way that we can help the world in being offering some of our resources to others. And again, that could be a very worldly activity, and I'm looking for my tax deduction. That could be a worldly activity, and that I want to make sure that my name gets on something, or that could be a care and a concern, or it can be part of a bodhisattva path when I could join it with this direct recognition of your value, this journey we're in together, and the inspiration to really make this meaningful for all of us. And I don't want anyone to suffer. And so cultivating that mind, and with that mind, the very simple actions in our giving can be very transformed. And the teachings on this are clear in that we don't even have to have things to give. It's the wish to give. It's the mind that wants to give. There's a lot of people we can't help, but even aspiring to help cultivates that mental state. And so it's really quite valuable. I once gave a teaching. It was, where is this? Grass Valley, California, and it's done on offerings, and there's some suggested amount, but whatever you offered. And this guy came. He had a bag of rice, and he had a little card that he made, and that was his offering for the teaching. And that to me was like the greatest gift, because like he really wanted these teachings. Like he was going to do something with it. He didn't have much, but he had a bag of rice that he got, and he had this card that he wrote. And he gave me something else, I think, some kind of a feather. But that kind of giving, that kind of, hey, this is valuable. I want to offer something. And so, with this mind of generosity that we're cultivating, it also gives of our time, right? It's a lot easier to give a gift often than it is to give our time. Somebody wants my time. Well, it's a very precious commodity to me. Can't I just give you a check and you go away? It's a very different mind state as well. Can I really be generous with my attention, with my time? Someone needs some help. Can I do that? Can I take some time? Someone told a story. It was Monday night in the group. I mean, this was generosity. Some guy broke down in like a big truck, like we're talking, it was more than a 1-ton truck. It was this big 20-foot or something, right? And he's broke down and he's blocking traffic, and he's upset, right? It's not that he's just broke down. He's upset. So he's yelling. His daughter's trying to calm him down. And he shared that all these people rushed to help push, because he got there and he's like, push. And the guy's like, I'm not, this thing's not going to move. It's no way. But more people came, and more people came, and a lot of people came. And then, they got it moving. It started to move. And this guy is like freaking out. He's getting out of the truck and not driving the truck. And, things get kind of crazy. And he's yelling at people. He's just frustrated. He's trying to get in there. And but people continue to help, and they got through the intersection, and they're getting it towards the parking lot. And then the guy was like, "Well, not that parking spot." like, it's not enough. We got you saved. Like the guy's like, "No, we need this other one," and they actually all they continued even in with that kind of demand attitude. Everyone rerouted and pushed his truck to the other parking spot where he could start to be at least a little okay. And I thought, what a great story of that desire to help, right? Even in the face of someone not acting very appropriate, maybe. And in the face of long odds, like he got there was no way he could push that truck. And the guy's just push, and he's like trying to push. And he's doing it anyway. And I thought, wow, that's such a bodhisattva motivation, right? Because if we can have this aspiration where it says, I'm here until all beings are free of suffering, that could sound like, yeah, right. And then there's these three aspirations. One is that 3 levels, sort of this idea that I'm going to become awakened so I can help others. There's this type where, I'm going to work and we're all going to find our way to liberation together. And then there's this one where everyone's going to be liberated, then I'll cross through. And His Holiness the Dalai Lama, it's interesting. He said the other, the first one makes sense. I can become awakened, I can help others. The other two, not so much. Like, like I'm not sure how you would do that. Doesn't seem very possible. But he said that doesn't mean that the aspiration is not valuable. He actually said that aspiration can be 10 times more valuable to cultivate that mind state. Because we have to remember that's what we're always working with, my mind. I am not the creator of the universe. I am not the creator of your karma. I am not all that. You are all an opportunity for me to discover my true nature. That's a perspective to engage in this practice. And my obscurations are going to arise as I interact with others. And I can see you as the opportunity of the path, or I can see you as in my way, or I can see you as robbing me of my time, or I can see you as, but in fact, you all, everyone, is giving me the opportunity to recognize my true nature and find liberation, and that great aspiration of a compassion for all beings is the fuel. It's the skillful means. So that's the way we engage in generosity, with that mind. And then it's easier to give, things. It's easier to give help. So the three categories, because since it's important to always go through the technical piece here of the second one is, how do we offer generosity with people who are afraid or in danger? So to always offer that if people are unsafe or they're in fear, to provide protection. And the third one is Dharma, really be generous with our Dharma. Be generous with that. Which doesn't mean we go out preaching on the corners. And it doesn't mean, I pretend to be more knowing than I am. It means that I offer as much as I can, where I can, some tools that eliminate suffering. That I offer what little help that I've had to others. And Dharma shows up in different ways. So, for example, I just read Catholic prayer, right? And to someone who's struggling and they're Catholic, read them a Catholic prayer. That's Dharma practice. Telling them, the 8 verses of thought transformation is probably not going to help them. Not going to alleviate, their struggle, and isn't going to eliminate suffering. So my Dharma can show up in the way that's most beneficial for that person. And Dharma then is always focused on alleviating suffering and tools that help people see clearly. So we can do that in a lot of ways. Sometimes just the example of kindness can do that. So in these 3 categories of giving, underlying is the awareness of our interdependence of each other and for each other, and that great aspiration to really make good use of this lifetime that we have in the best possible way. And so naturally I'd give. Why wouldn't I? Why wouldn't I? Here's a cause for my enlightenment. That's kind of self-seeking again, isn't it? In context. That's one of those things that I usually tell it. It's not even a joke. It's just amusing to me. But if you go to complain to an old lama at the monastery about some other monk who's not doing this or not doing that, how they get you frustrated, or how bad they are. When they get done laughing at you, they may say something like, so let me get this straight. So you're upset at the cause for your enlightenment. Is that correct? I'm not asking you questions anymore. I'm going to take my resentment and go back to my little room. You're upset at the cause, at what is showing you your mental afflictions, right? Oh, yeah. Yeah. it's rare that you go to the room and complain after that. Then you just go and seek advice, which is more helpful. So it's with that mind stream that we can approach these 6 perfections. So we're going to spend some time each week, unpacking that. But I thought today was a real good opportunity to start distinguishing, what makes us and what prepares the ground for the Bodhisattva path, and how it can show up. And I don't think it's one that a lot of people jump from. Whoa, that's the highest path, I'm on it. And I think it really makes sense to how am I suffering this lifetime? Maybe I'm starting at the first scope. I would like to suffer less. That's an appropriate place to start. And then let the other motivations unfold, because this is either true or it's not. And the source of my suffering is clear or not. And then as conditions ripen, I may find that I went from someone who just wants to suffer less to someone who can't stand the suffering of others. It might happen, but even if I, somewhere along that line, be open to it, investigate, question, I'm always planting the seeds of awakening. So I don't think there's a rush to go here. I think that's actually doesn't allow the foundation. I get this, and that's on quicksand. And it's much more relevant and to really start here, to really question, to really check, and see, how can I suffer less now? And is that really coming from my attitudes and perceptions? Or, maybe John really is a jerk, and he's the cause of my suffering. Let me check that out first, and then let the rest of that path unfold. So, any questions? I don't know if Hannah came back, or we also have a virtual group of people online. So, and if any questions here, yes.
How do you feel about considering ourselves as, through the eyes of equanimity, as being one of the myriad others who are suffering? And obviously, me personally, I'm very intimately aware and familiar with my own suffering. So I tend to be more readily available to allay my own suffering, just because I'm so familiar with it, and I know what relieves it, and I know what causes it. So I tend to find myself, even with this altruistic intention that I'm trying to cultivate, this tendency to see myself as being one of the many 7.4 billion people, but I also know very well what to do for me. And I find that creates what has been, prior to being introduced to the altruistic intention, just my modus operandi of always taking care of myself first. How do we juggle that, knowing what you need to do for you? If you're hungry, you need food. I don't know if he's hungry. I don't know if she's hungry. Do I just offer them, what I would eat first? Or do I take care of my hunger? And then, how do you juggle that? Because you are so intimately familiar with this sack.
Yeah, that's where we get curious about other sacks.
Right.
Is what you're asking, I think. And so I'm not sure if everyone online got that, but how it sounds like, if I can paraphrase, is how do I start recognizing the needs and suffering of others, beyond my own known experience? Is that what you're sharing and seeing?
Yeah. How can we be skillful as far as attending to that, right? Knowing this more? How do we start to really attend to others more than to oneself?
Yeah, and if I'm reading correctly, there's a recognition that I'm going to be limited based on I only have my experience and knowledge, and so it's going to be difficult sometimes to understand another's needs from a different cultural background or a different way of being raised. That and so therein lies, I think, the idea of building empathy and patience. So I'm in a fortunate opportunity where I get to work with a lot of people in recovery. They share their stories. And so I've actually been personally involved where people will sit and tell me they're suffering. I've done that for over 30 years. So, and one thing I've found is this twofold sword. One is what you're pointing out, that there's, people can suffer in different ways I'm unaware of and can't see. And they have needs that I'm unaware of and can't see. But if I go through that layer, there's going to be this thing that we all share. And to give an example of that, I once heard a woman who was sharing that her, in people in recovery of like addiction and so forth, tend to have what they call a bottom, pitiful, incomprehensible experience that of so much suffering that they finally become willing to change, to seek treatment, to get help. And this woman's bottom was falling off a bar stool at a cocktail lounge at a cocktail party. And she was, I'm a guy who lived under a bridge, and I'm sitting there thinking like, that didn't sound very humiliating, right? Externally, very different experience than what I felt in my shame. But what I recognized was the emotional distress was the same. The undercurrent demoralization was the same degree, level, and sensation. So outwardly, things are very different. So-and-so looks like they have a good life, they live in Aspen, they have this, but their mental and emotional suffering is of the same degree, and someone with much less resources. And so what I tend to try to focus on is to get past the layer and then find that ground that we all relate to, which is fundamentally, I think most human beings in general want to know that they're okay, that I have some value, that I have some worthiness. And anger, resentment, and jealousy is usually underlying a state that I'm not being valued, I'm not being attended. So the first place to start is the one thing that can address that, and that is my attention. My attention. To attend to care for. And I think that's a good starting point, because I found that I'll spend a session with people for an hour or whatnot. And at the end of that whole thing, of all the talk and all the thing, fundamentally, there's just one basic thing to leave with, is that you're okay and you're valuable. If they leave with that, they're okay, And so, there's obvious things that, people see people need meals and we feed them. But what's going to feed them is when I attend to someone, I give them value and people feel valued. I think that's a good starting point. And I think the other stuff starts to unfold with that. General.
It seems like also that attention, you will observe, being an observant human being, attending to somebody, even if it's just for 10 minutes, like a child and a mother that are having difficulty, just attending there, just not looking at them, but listening. And maybe, they're just crying about the crayon, and you can just quickly just drop by a crayon as you walk out of the door, kind of. But that attention would allow you to shift from yourself to that.
Right.
Because attention can, as in meditation, we're attending to the busyness here, what's going on outside. But that attention, almost like meditating, present with that person, would allow you to find an equal ground. And then, hey, maybe I can help. Maybe they just need to know that they are okay, and then I can go about. Okay.
Yeah. And they might even tell you they're hungry.
Yeah, and then you can say, yeah, well, there's a great pizza place, so I'll get you a slice.
Yeah.
Well, that's nice. Thank you, John.
Thank you. That's a great question. Great question. Yeah, wisely giving is fun too. I was in Chicago, walking down the streets, kind of an inner city street thing. I make eye contact. When you walk in the inner cities, generally you don't make eye contact, but I can't help myself. And I tend to people. This guy is a little bit, rough around the edges, and he saw me make eye contact. So, hey man, I'm really hungry. I haven't eaten in, this and that. And I'm all like, well, great, I'm going to get some food. Why don't you come with me and get some burritos? Or, I don't know if there's like there's like a burger place there. And no, it wasn't burger size. I'm vegetarian, so it wasn't that. He had mentioned McDonald's. That's what it was. He, can I get a burger? And I said, oh, good, I'm going to get some food. Why don't you come on down? Oh, well, I got bad teeth. I can't really eat that stuff. So in one question, he's asking for food. Within a minute, he's not interested in me having a meal with him or getting him food. I just laughed at him. Just with him, not at him. I just said, "But you really want some money, right?" And he's like, he just busted up, and he was caught. So I think I gave him $1 just for his time. Because you're gonna go buy some alcohol. He's like, yeah, not into that, but just for your time, I think I'd give him. I forget what I did, but it's also some wisdom there, right? It's not always giving to enable an unhealthy behavior, but he was his character. So
Attentive.
yeah,
Attentive.
first to his expressed need, and then to his ultimate need or perceived need. But also, I visited with him for a little bit on the corner. We hung out for a bit. Yeah. Because he was so quick with it. We'll get some food. Oh, I got bad teeth. Yeah, it hurts. Yeah, right. Well, let's go get smoothies. Well, that stuff doesn't sell with my son so much. I'll tell you, this rum, though. I'll tell you that stuff. You want to talk about feeding you. Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty funny. He's a character. All right, so let's go ahead and now dedicate our time here together, this rare and precious opportunity to cultivate our path, what we chose to do on a Wednesday night. Let us dedicate the merit and the wisdom that we have accumulated here today and throughout our lifetimes, both individually and collectively. Let us dedicate this for the benefit of all sentient beings. May all sentient beings be free of suffering, find their liberation, and may we be able to use the merit and wisdom accumulated to purify our own minds so we can recognize our Buddha nature and truly be a benefit to all beings. And may we also dedicate the merit and wisdom we have accumulated here today and throughout our lifetimes for the long life of all the spiritual teachers, of all spiritual traditions that are authentically teaching a path of no more suffering. May they live long and may their teachings flourish and be a benefit to all sentient beings.